Two friends, same salary, same starting savings, same city. One decision made 10 years apart, and by year 10, their bank accounts don't even look like they belong to the same generation. Let's call them Jake and Ryan. Same graduating class, same first job offer, same starting paycheck to the dollar. In year 1, Jake signs a 30-year mortgage. Ryan signs a 12-month lease. That's the entire difference between them on day 1. One signature. Here's the uncomfortable part. Everyone around them already has an opinion about who made the smarter choice. Almost nobody in that conversation ever actually ran the numbers. So let's run them side by side, year by year, and let the math decide instead of the dinner table. Year 1. Jake buys a home worth $400,000. He puts down 10%, $40,000, and finances the rest at a rate near 6.6%, today's going rate. His monthly payment, once you add taxes, insurance, and the mortgage itself, lands close to $2,600. Ryan rents a comparable place nearby. His monthly rent, $1,669. Same neighborhood, same square footage, $1,000 gap every single month before either of them has done anything else with their money. Jake hands over $40,000 on day 1 just to get the keys. Ryan hands over a security deposit, roughly a tenth of that, and keeps the rest sitting in his account. Right there, month 1, the comparison already breaks the assumption most people walk in with. Renting isn't the reckless choice here. It's the cheaper one, on paper, from the very first bill. Year 2. Jake's mortgage payment hasn't moved, $2,600. Locked, the same number it'll be in year 15, year 20, year 30. Ryan's rent has already climbed, roughly 3%, which doesn't sound dramatic until you watch what it does over time. A $2,000 rent today drifts toward $2,300 within 5 years, without Ryan doing anything wrong. His landlord doesn't need his permission. He just gets the new number in an email. Here's where the two stories start pulling apart in opposite directions, and it's worth sitting with both at once. Jake is locking in certainty. Whatever happens to prices, to inflation, to the rental market around him, his number stays fixed. Ryan is holding on to flexibility. He can move cities in 30 days if a better job appears. Jake cannot. If Jake needs to leave before roughly 5 to 7 years pass, he loses money, real money, to closing costs and selling fees that eat 7 to 8% of his home's value the moment he signs to sell it. So already, this isn't really which one is smarter. It's which one of these two men actually knows how long he's staying. Year 5. This is where the story usually gets told wrong. So let's tell it right. Jake has built up real equity in his home. Some of that came from paying down the loan. Some came from the home simply appreciating in value. On paper, his net worth looks genuinely impressive compared to where he started. But here's what almost nobody mentions in that same sentence. Ryan took the $40,000 he never spent on a down payment, along with the roughly $1,000 monthly gap between his rent and Jake's mortgage payment, and invested every bit of it instead of spending it. At a reasonable long-run return, somewhere close to 7%, that discipline alone can grow into $60,000 or more within 5 years, sometimes outpacing the equity Jake built in his house over the exact same stretch. Read that twice, because it quietly breaks the entire cultural script most American families grew up believing. Ryan isn't falling behind by renting. If he actually invests the difference, he can be building wealth just as fast, sometimes faster, than Jake, without ever owning a roof. Notice the word if. Year 7, and here's the twist that decides almost the entire outcome, more than the interest rate, more than the appreciation, more than anything either of them controls about the market. Jake never had a choice about saving. His mortgage payment left his account automatically every single month, whether he felt disciplined that week or not. The bank simply didn't ask. Ryan had a choice every single month. Invest the difference, like the plan said, or spend it on a nicer apartment, a vacation, a new car, life. And here's the uncomfortable statistic sitting underneath this entire comparison. The median homeowner's net worth in America sits around $430,000. The median renter's net worth sits around $10,000, a 43-to-1 gap. That gap isn't proof that buying beats renting on a spreadsheet. It's proof of something quieter and more human. Most renters in real life don't actually invest the difference the way Ryan did in our example. They spend it gradually, invisibly, without ever noticing the number that could have existed instead. Jake didn't win because owning is mathematically superior. Jake won because his bank forced a habit onto him that most people left to their own willpower simply never maintain on their own. That's the real comparison hiding underneath the entire rent versus buy debate. It was never really Jake's house against Ryan's portfolio. It was always Jake's forced discipline against Ryan's promised discipline, and forced discipline wins far more often, not because it's smarter, but because it doesn't ask permission. Year 10. Let's zoom out and look at both men standing where they are now. Jake owns his home outright on paper, minus what's left on the loan. His monthly costs never moved. Inflation happened around him and never touched his housing bill. That's not a small thing. That's insurance against a future he couldn't predict on day one. Ryan, if he actually kept his half of the plan, is sitting on a genuinely competitive portfolio, liquid, flexible, movable to any city on short notice, unattached to a roof, a property tax bill, or a broken water heater at 2 a.m. If he didn't keep his half of the plan, he's sitting on 10 years of rent receipts and very little else, and no calculator in the world can fix that after the fact. Here's the honest ending to this comparison, the one that doesn't flatter either side. Buying wins when someone stays put long enough to absorb the upfront cost, when the local market doesn't run wildly overpriced compared to rent, and when the owner values a locked, predictable bill more than flexibility. Renting wins when someone might move, when the local market is expensive relative to what renting the same space would cost, and, critically, only when the renter genuinely does what Ryan did in the good version of this story. Invest the gap instead of absorbing it into daily life. So it was never really Jake versus Ryan. It was discipline versus temptation, wearing two different financial costumes. Which raises the only question actually worth asking yourself before you sign anything. If nobody was forcing you to save, the way a mortgage forces Jake, would you actually be Ryan in the good version of this story? Or the version where the money just quietly disappeared, one flexible, unforced month at a time?